I was supposed to feel joy that day. That's what everyone kept telling me. The servers moved through the room with trays of champagne, soft jazz played under the murmur of conversation, and the chandeliers above flickered like something out of a dream. The flowers were exactly as she wanted them, white roses and lavender arranged carefully with navy blue accents to match the bridesmaids' dresses. Claire was always particular. Even when she was a little girl, she'd insist on matching her socks to the color of the ribbon in her hair. I used to tease her, "It's just clothes, honey." But she'd always look up at me with those steady eyes and say, "It's who I am." I didn't understand it back then. Now I think I do. She was never just dressing. She was choosing how the world would see her. And now, at 27, she looked like something out of a movie. Graceful, composed, radiant in lace and satin. Her hair was pulled back in a simple low bun, exactly how her mother wore it on our wedding day. It nearly stopped my heart, but she didn't walk down the aisle on my arm. She chose her brother, Ethan, my son. That part I knew about. She told me weeks before the wedding, carefully, as if tiptoeing through a minefield. "Dad," she said, "I've decided that Ethan will walk me down the aisle. He represents this new chapter of my life and it just feels right." I nodded. I smiled. I said I understood, and in a way I did. The divorce had left more than one fracture in our family. Maybe I didn't deserve that moment. Maybe, in her heart, I was still the man who left. But what no one told me, what I found out in front of 200 guests, was about the dance, the father-daughter dance. I had held on to that, clung to it really. When she said no to walking down the aisle with me, I swallowed it because I believed we'd still have our moment. That one song, where I could hold her close and maybe, just maybe, remind her that I wasn't all bad, that I still loved her, even if I had failed her in ways I didn't fully understand. But during the reception, the priest, who'd known our family for years, got up to make a toast. He said beautiful things about love, about marriage, about faith. And then, as if mentioning the weather, he said, "Claire has asked to skip the traditional father-daughter dance tonight. She felt it didn't reflect their relationship, and I deeply respect that." The room stayed silent. Maybe nobody understood the weight of what he said, but I did. I stood there, frozen, the champagne flute trembling in my hand. I looked across the room at Claire. She wasn't looking at me. She kept her gaze down, her smile still painted on for the guests. That's when I knew. I wasn't just a side character in her story. I was a symbol of disappointment, of pain, of something she wanted to forget. So I walked over to the front desk. I asked the venue coordinator for a copy of the receipt, the one I'd paid in full, $23,000 for the venue, catering, flowers, lighting, all of it. She looked confused, but handed it to me, and I left, with the receipt in my hand, and a hole in my chest where a dance should have been. I didn't drive home right away. Instead, I parked at the edge of the lake just outside of town. Same lake where I used to take Claire fishing when she was little. She never cared much for the fishing part, said worms were too squishy and the waiting was boring, but she loved the quiet, loved sitting on the dock, legs swinging, asking me questions about clouds and God and why dogs tilted their heads. I sat there for over an hour, staring at the black water, the receipt crumpled on the passenger seat. I don't even know why I asked for it. Maybe some part of me needed proof that I was still part of this day, that I had at the very least funded something, because it sure didn't feel like I had contributed anything else. The worst part was, I wasn't angry. Not really. I was hurt. Deeply. In that quiet, sinking kind of way you feel when someone you love doesn't say goodbye. She didn't fight with me, didn't shout or cry or accuse. She simply erased me, edited me out of her wedding like you'd crop a stranger out of a photograph. And the terrible thing is, I can't say I didn't see it coming. The distance between us didn't happen overnight. It grew slow and steady, like water under a door. After the divorce, I thought I was doing the right thing by giving her space. Her mother had primary custody, and Claire didn't want to shuttle back and forth every week. I told her I understood, that I'd be around when she needed me. She didn't call much, birthdays and Christmas maybe. A few times in high school when she needed help with a college essay or had a flat tire. I was there, always a phone call away, but I guess proximity isn't the same as presence, and she must have felt that. I remember one particular evening when she was about 12. I'd picked her up for the weekend and we stopped for dinner at a diner just outside of Denver. She was quiet that night, pushing her fries around the plate. Finally, she looked up and said, "Dad, how come you don't fight for me?" I didn't know what to say. I wanted to tell her I was trying to respect her choices, that I didn't want to make her life harder by dragging her into a custody war. But all she saw was a father who didn't show up. I failed her that night. I failed her in a lot of small ways that piled up until she couldn't see the man I was trying to be, only the man who hadn't been enough. And now, here I was, 58 years old, sitting alone in a car outside a lake, clinging to a receipt like it meant something. I stared at the paper again, the line items printed in black ink. Champagne toast for 200 guests. Floral arrangements, white rose and lavender. DJ and sound equipment. Lighting package. Every piece of her perfect day, and my name attached to the bottom as if that made me a part of it. But names don't mean much when they're not spoken. I wanted to believe she still loved me. That somewhere in her heart, I was still her dad, but I couldn't escape the fact that love unspoken begins to sound a lot like absence. And silence is the loudest rejection there is. The next morning, I found myself standing in my garage, staring at the box I hadn't touched in years. It was labeled Claire Oldstuff. The handwriting was mine, back when I still used Sharpies for everything and thought organizing memories into boxes would somehow preserve the past. I hadn't opened it since she left for college. It sat in the same corner, gathering dust, a quiet monument to a relationship that once felt unbreakable. I cleared a space on the workbench and lifted the lid. The first thing I saw was a crumpled drawing, stick figures under a bright yellow sun. "Me and Daddy at the lake," it said in shaky pink letters. Our heads were huge, our arms just lines, but the smiles, those were big, toothy, and wide. I stared at it for a long time, my thumb tracing the stick figure labeled Daddy. Then came the report cards, birthday cards I'd written and never sent, and a small velvet box that held the charm bracelet I'd given her on her 10th birthday. The one with the little silver book and the heart-shaped key. She loved that bracelet, wore it every day for a year straight. Then one day, it disappeared. I never asked about it. Maybe I should have. As I sifted through the box, a memory returned, vivid and painful. It was her 15th birthday. I had driven 3 hours from my new place in Boulder to surprise her. I had this idea that we'd go to her favorite diner, just the two of us, like old times. But when I arrived, she was already out with friends. Her mother looked at me with that expression I came to hate, half apologetic, half condescending. "She's a teenager now," she said. "She has her own life." I left the gift on the counter and drove home in silence. That was the day I stopped trying to surprise her. Looking back, I wonder if that moment, one I barely registered at the time, was a turning point, a small hurt that grew roots. Or maybe it wasn't just one moment. Maybe it was all of them. The birthdays I missed, the games I was late to, the weekends I let slide because work got busy or traffic was bad. Every father thinks he has more time to fix things, more time to be forgiven. But time has this way of hardening silence into stone. As I closed the box, my phone buzzed. It was Ethan. He didn't waste time. "You left without saying anything. Claire's a mess." I swallowed hard. "She didn't want me there, Ethan." "That's not true. She needed it to be on her terms." Skipping the father-daughter dance was on her terms? There was a pause. Then he sighed. "Look, I'm not saying she's right. I'm just saying, you still matter." Even if she doesn't know how to show it. I wanted to believe him, but it's hard to feel like you matter when the most important person in your life makes a public ceremony out of excluding you. I hung up without saying goodbye, not out of anger, just because I didn't trust my voice not to break. And in that silence, the truth settled in. Maybe this wasn't just about the wedding. Maybe this was about everything we never said to each other, every hug withheld, every conversation avoided, every second chance that slipped through my fingers, because I thought love alone would be enough. It wasn't. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan spinning above me, listening to the low hum of a world that kept moving, even when I didn't feel like I belonged in it anymore. I reached for my phone a dozen times, thumb hovering over Claire's name. But what would I even say? "I'm sorry your wedding didn't include a dance with your father. I wish I'd been better, but I didn't know how." None of it felt like enough. None of it ever had. Around 3 a.m., I got up and went downstairs. I poured myself a drink, something I hadn't done in months. Not because I was trying to quit, but because I didn't see the point anymore. Grief has a way of dulling all appetites, even for things that used to numb the pain. I sat at the kitchen table and let the scotch burn down my throat. Then I opened my laptop. I wasn't sure what I was doing. Maybe looking for distraction, maybe searching for answers I'd avoided too long. Instead, I found myself scrolling through old emails, messages from Claire going back over a decade. Most were short, informational. "Hey Dad, can you send my insurance card? Can you help with FAFSA stuff? I need to borrow the car for a weekend." Transactional, but one caught my eye. It was from 2016. She was a freshman in college, and I had sent her a clumsy email just checking in, asking how her classes were going. I'd told her I missed her, that I was proud of her, that I knew things between us were complicated, but I hoped we could talk more soon. She had replied simply, "Thanks, Dad, I'm okay, I know you're trying. I'm just not sure if I know how to let you back in." I stared at those words until the screen blurred, not sure how to let me back in. It hadn't even occurred to me then that maybe she wanted to, but didn't know how. That maybe she was just as afraid of getting hurt as I was. I think that's what hurt most. We weren't just estranged. We were both afraid. Two people tiptoeing around the wreckage of what used to be home. It's easy to say someone shut you out. It's harder to admit you stopped knocking. And maybe, over time, I did stop. I stopped calling unless there was a reason. I stopped asking questions that might stir up conflict. I stopped showing up unannounced or pushing for more than she was willing to give. I told myself I was respecting her boundaries, but maybe I was just afraid of rejection. Maybe I was trying to protect myself from the pain of hearing out loud that I'd failed as a father. Because deep down, I always feared that was true. And now, I feared something even worse, that it was too late to change any of it. The next morning I drove to our old house. The one Claire grew up in, the one we sold after the divorce. It sat there, quiet as ever, on the corner of Chestnut and Willow in a quiet suburb of Denver. Same red shutters, same crooked mailbox. Even the little tree Claire planted in second grade was still there, taller now, grown into something sturdy and strong. Stronger than I ever was, I thought. I parked across the street and sat there for a while. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe some kind of answer. Maybe a ghost. I could still remember how it smelled in the mornings, coffee and cinnamon. Claire would tiptoe downstairs in her pajamas, dragging that frayed stuffed elephant she carried everywhere until she was 9. I'd lift her up and set her on the counter, pour cereal while she kicked her feet and asked questions about the moon and what happens to birds in winter. She used to look at me like I knew everything. That was the hardest thing to lose. Not her love, but her belief in me. The house had new owners now, a young couple maybe. There was a plastic tricycle in the yard, a chalk drawing on the sidewalk. For a moment I felt like a trespasser in someone else's memories. But they weren't someone else's. They were mine. Ours. I rolled down the window and just breathed, the kind of long, heavy breath that carries more years than air. And then, like a reflex, I drove by Claire's high school. It hadn't changed much. The parking lot was still cracked in the same places, the old bleachers still rusting in the sun. I parked there too, staring at the front entrance, and suddenly I was back in that cafeteria, parent-teacher night, 10th grade. Claire had just gotten her first C in math and was terrified I'd be disappointed. I wasn't. I told her grades didn't matter nearly as much as kindness and curiosity. I remember how she smiled at that. It felt like a win at the time. But now I wonder, did I say it because I meant it, or because I didn't know how to teach her anything more? I sat there until the school bell rang and the parking lot filled with kids, teenagers laughing, shouting, brushing past each other like nothing in the world could touch them. I envied them. Not because they were young, but because they still believed they had time. Time to fix things, to say what needed to be said, to dance with their daughters at weddings. That's what time does. It tricks you, makes you believe there will always be another chance, but there isn't always. Sometimes there's just a crumpled receipt on the passenger seat and a question echoing in your chest. When did she stop needing me? And the harder one, when did I stop trying to be needed? I drove home with the window down, letting the wind hit my face like penance. And when I walked back into the house, I knew something had shifted. Nothing big, just something. For the first time in a long time, I wanted to reach her. Not to demand anything, not to defend myself, just to ask a question I should have asked years ago. Where did I lose you, Claire? It took me 3 days to work up the nerve. 3 days of pacing my house like a ghost, of drafting texts and deleting them, of calling her number and hanging up before the first ring. And then, one afternoon, I finally pressed send. It was a voice message. I didn't trust myself with words on a screen. They always felt too sterile, too easy to misread. My voice cracked halfway through. Hey Claire, I'm not sure what to say. I just wanted you to know I'm thinking about you. I know your wedding didn't go the way I expected, but I want to understand. If there's anything you're willing to share, I'm here. I listened to it once before sending it. It sounded tired, hollow, but it was honest. Then I waited. An hour passed, then 2, then 6. Nothing. By the next morning, I told myself not to be surprised. Claire was always careful with her emotions, never impulsive. She built walls with patience, stone by stone. But still, I checked my phone every 10 minutes. Midday, I wandered back into the garage. The box was still on the bench, half closed. I reached for something near the bottom, a small, dusty cassette tape. I blinked. It was from my old answering machine. I had kept a few tapes after we moved out of the house, just in case I wanted to hear old voices again. Back when I thought nostalgia could be a kind of healing, I dug out the old player from a drawer and popped in the tape. There was static at first, then a beep, then her voice. Hi Dad, it's me, Claire. I guess you're not home. I was thinking about that time we went to the lake and you let me skip school for the day. Remember, you said it was a mental health emergency, but really we just ate pancakes and talked about nothing. I miss that. I miss you. I don't know why I'm calling. I guess I just wanted to hear your voice on the machine. Anyway, okay. Bye. I sat down, completely still. The tape kept spinning in silence. I tried to remember when she'd left that message. Her voice was younger, softer, maybe high school, maybe college. I had no memory of ever hearing it before, or maybe I did. Maybe I was too wrapped up in something else to listen. She'd called, she'd tried, and I never answered. I wanted to go back in time, grab the version of myself who let that call slip into oblivion and shake him awake. Tell him this was the moment to turn the tide, to be present, to be better. But we don't get to go back. We only get the quiet echo of what we missed. I listened to it again. And again. Her voice became a ghost in the room, circling me, haunting me. By the 4th replay, I was crying. Not the kind of tears that fall with dignity, but the kind that break you open. It was the first time in years I'd let myself feel all of it. The guilt, the failure, the endless ache of what we lost. And then, just as I wiped my eyes and reached to stop the tape, my phone buzzed. A message from Claire. 4 words. Can we talk soon? I stared at her message for nearly 5 minutes before typing a reply. Yes, whenever you're ready. She answered almost immediately. Tonight. Can I call you after work? I typed back, of course, but my hands were shaking. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but I knew it wouldn't be easy. That evening I sat on the couch with the lights off, phone in hand, heart beating like it used to when I waited outside her ballet recitals, nervous for no good reason. Just a father wanting to be enough. At 7:14 p.m. my phone rang. Her name on the screen hit me like a wave. I answered quickly. Hi. Hi, Dad. Her voice was flat, controlled, not angry, just careful. There was a long pause. I didn't know whether to speak or let her lead. She did. "I got your message," she said. "Thank you for reaching out." "I wasn't sure if I should," I admitted, "but I needed to." She exhaled. "Yeah, I figured." Another pause. "I wanted to explain," she said, "about the dance, about why I didn't include you." I swallowed. "Okay." She hesitated, then, "It wasn't about punishing you. I know it felt that way. But it wasn't." "Then what was it?" "It was about protecting myself," she said softly. "That dance, and it's not just a tradition, it's a statement. It says, this is the man who raised me, who stood by me, who shaped who I am." Her voice wavered. And I couldn't pretend that was true. The words stung more than I expected, not because they were cruel, but because they were honest, devastatingly honest. "I'm not saying you weren't there at all," she continued, "but you were there, when it was convenient, when it didn't get messy." "That's not fair," I said quietly. "Maybe not," she said. "But it's how it felt." I closed my eyes. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, to explain all the reasons why I made the choices I did. The divorce, the work, the distance, but it all sounded like noise in my head, excuses, and none of them changed the fact that she'd felt abandoned. "I don't hate you," she added. "I hope you know that." "I didn't," I whispered. She went quiet. "I didn't hate you, Claire," I said. I didn't know how to fix it. And after a while, I guess I gave up." "I noticed," she said. There it was again, simple, direct, true. I rubbed my eyes. "You don't owe me anything, not forgiveness, not explanations. But I want to know, is there a path forward, even if it's slow?" She didn't respond right away. Then finally, "I don't know." My heart sank. "But," she added, "I didn't block your number. That has to mean something." I laughed, a dry, broken sound. "It does." "I'm not ready to talk more tonight," she said, "but maybe later this week." "Of course," I said. "Anytime." We said goodbye quietly. No promises, no grand declarations, just a small crack in the wall between us. After I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time, and for the first time in years I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not peace, not forgiveness, just the faint, flickering hope that maybe, just maybe, she hadn't given up on me completely. The next few days were strange, quieter than usual somehow. Not on the outside, the traffic still passed, the neighbors still shouted over lawnmowers, and the world, of course, kept spinning. But something inside me had gone still. I kept thinking about what Claire said. I couldn't pretend that was true. It echoed in my head at odd moments, when I was pouring coffee, folding laundry, staring blankly at the news. I wondered if she'd practiced saying it, if she rehearsed it the way people rehearse hard truths in the mirror. It didn't matter. The words were true no matter how they came out. She couldn't pretend I'd raised her, not the way a father is supposed to, and maybe I hadn't. There were years I could barely keep myself afloat, let alone offer anyone else stability. After the divorce, I buried myself in work, told myself I was doing it for the kids, providing, securing their future. But I think, deep down, I was hiding, from shame, from guilt, from the slow realization that I'd failed at something I thought I was built for. I was supposed to be the anchor, but all I ever did was drift. That night, I pulled out a drawer from the old roll-top desk in my study. It stuck a little, as always, but finally gave way with a groan. Inside was a folder marked Claire. I hadn't touched it in years. Inside were photos, report cards, clippings from her high school newspaper, and one letter, folded neatly in thirds, yellowed at the edges. It was dated September 2nd, 2012. I had written it the week she left for college. I never sent it. My hands shook as I unfolded it. "Claire, you're probably unpacking your dorm right now, or maybe out meeting people who'll become part of your new world. I'm proud of you. I hope you know that. I don't know how to say this out loud, so I'm writing it here, hoping someday you'll read it. I know I wasn't there like I should have been. I know I missed more than a few birthdays, more than a few dinners, I let the silence grow between us. And I'm sorry. There isn't a day I don't regret the years I lost with you. But I want you to know, I was always watching from afar, always cheering you on, always loving you, even when I didn't know how to show it right. If you ever need me, I'll be here. A love. I folded the letter back and stared at the handwriting like it belonged to someone else, someone who still believed in second chances. I could have sent that letter, but I didn't. And maybe that's the most honest summary of my fatherhood. Things I meant to do, but didn't. I stayed up late holding that letter, wondering if it was too late now. If offering her this version of myself, the man who finally saw it all clearly, would be anything more than a last-minute apology. And then I remembered something Ethan said during our call. You still matter, even if she doesn't know how to show it. Maybe. Maybe this letter wasn't too late after all. Maybe it was the only thing I had left to give her. I scanned the letter into a PDF that morning, typed out a short message, simple, quiet. I found something I meant to give you years ago. I'm not expecting anything. I just wanted you to have it. Then I hit send. Immediately I regretted it. Not because I didn't mean it, but because it suddenly felt like a selfish move. Like I was throwing my guilt at her feet, hoping she'd do something with it. But guilt isn't a gift, it's a burden. And I wasn't sure she deserved to carry mine anymore. I didn't hear back that day, or the next. I tried not to check my email too often, but my eyes kept drifting toward the inbox like a reflex. It wasn't until the third day that I saw her name. No subject line, just Claire Simmons. I opened it with a lump in my throat. Her reply was short. I read the letter. I appreciate that you sent it, but I need you to understand something. It wasn't just about birthdays or missed dinners. It wasn't about the absence. It was about the silence. When Mom cried in the kitchen at night, you weren't there. When I found out she was taking anti-anxiety meds and didn't want me to tell anyone, I didn't know who to talk to. When Ethan crashed his bike and split open his chin, and I held his hand all the way to the ER, I had no idea how to call you. You weren't unreachable. You just didn't make space for us to reach you. I don't say this to hurt you, but I need you to know. Some of the damage wasn't what you missed. It was how much we had to carry without you. I stared at the screen, stunned. It wasn't anger in her words. It wasn't blame either. Not exactly. It was something more painful. A calm, cold truth. I had spent years thinking I'd failed her by not being present enough, but that wasn't the heart of it. I failed her by making her feel like she had to grow up without a place to land. I was always here if she needed me, but I hadn't made myself reachable. I hadn't made myself safe. There's a difference between being absent and being unavailable, and I was the latter. The door wasn't locked, but it was heavy, hard to push open. She'd knocked maybe, but it had felt like too much. My instinct was to respond right away, to say, I didn't know, I'm sorry, I see it now. But I stopped myself because this wasn't about fixing it in one message. It was about listening, finally. Just listening. So I didn't reply that night. Instead, I sat outside on the back porch, the air thick with Colorado summer heat, and let her words settle into me like stones dropped into a lake. And I remembered a moment I hadn't thought of in years. Claire was maybe 7. She had scraped her knee on the driveway and came running inside crying. Her mom was out. I'd panicked, rushed her to the sink, dabbed it too hard with alcohol, and told her to be brave. She cried harder, and then she looked at me, face streaked with tears, and said, I don't want to be brave all the time. That line landed different now. Maybe all this time, she'd just wanted space to fall apart. And I never made room for that, because I was too scared to admit that I had fallen apart first. I sat with her message for 2 full days, read it over and over, not to argue with it, not to prepare a response, but to absorb it, to let it do what it needed to do. I wanted to fix it. That's what fathers are supposed to do, right? Fix the broken things, patch up the wounds, glue the pieces back together. But this wasn't something that could be fixed with a sorry, so I didn't reply with an explanation. I didn't defend myself. I didn't point to the ways I had tried. I just wrote, would you be open to meeting in person? No expectations. I'd just like to see you, to listen. She didn't respond for a day. Then, okay, coffee on Saturday? Somewhere public. Somewhere public. That part stung, but I understood it. She needed distance, she needed control. And honestly, I needed accountability. I needed to face her without hiding behind a screen. Saturday came. I wore the blue shirt she once complimented back in high school. It was silly, but it felt like the kind of small gesture that might matter. The cafe was on 9th, and Madison, a quiet place with big windows and second-hand books stacked along the walls. I got there early, ordered black coffee, sat by the window, heart pounding. At exactly 10:03 she walked in. She looked tired, but beautiful. Strong in the way people are when they've built walls not to keep others out, but to keep themselves standing. I stood, gave a small, uncertain wave. She nodded, sat across from me. "Hi," I said. "Hi." We sat in silence for a moment. Then she pulled her jacket off and looked at me. Really looked. There wasn't anger in her eyes, just caution. "How have you been?" I asked. She gave a faint smile. "Busy. Work's been intense. I'm helping launch a new outreach project." "That sounds important." "It is." Another pause. I finally said, "I read your message 12 times." She nodded. "I figured you would." "You were right, about all of it." Her eyes didn't flinch. She just sipped her drink. "I thought being available meant being open," I said. "But I wasn't. I was just waiting for you to do the hard part." Claire didn't speak, but her posture softened just slightly. "I'm not here to rewrite the past," I added. "I know I can't. I want to be someone you don't have to pretend around, if that's still possible." She exhaled slowly. "I'm not ready for big changes. I'm not ready for family dinners or holidays, but I am open to conversations, honest ones. That's more than I deserve," I said. She looked at me. "Maybe, or maybe it's just what I need for me." It struck me then that this moment wasn't about my healing, it was about hers. And if I wanted to be part of her life again, I had to accept that forgiveness wasn't about erasing the pain. It was about respecting the space where the pain lived and showing up anyway. So we talked for 47 minutes. About work, about Ethan, about the book she was reading and the non-profit she was helping build. No tears, no hugs, just two people rebuilding something fragile. And just before she left, she said something I'll never forget. "You may not have been there the way I needed," she said, "but you're here now. That has to count for something." It did. It counted more than she could possibly know. After that coffee meeting, I didn't hear from her for 3 weeks. And strangely, I didn't panic, not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood something. Healing doesn't move in straight lines. It takes time, space, quiet. And that's exactly what I'd failed to give her for so many years. So I waited, not anxiously, not with expectation, just openly. And then one afternoon I found a package on my doorstep, small, wrapped in brown paper. No return address, but the handwriting was hers. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was something I hadn't seen in over a decade. The charm bracelet, the one I gave her on her 10th birthday. It was still silver, though tarnished now with time. The little book charm had a bent corner. The heart key still dangled beside it, worn and delicate. There was no note, no explanation, just the bracelet. I sat down on the steps and held it in my hand like it was a fragile bird. I remembered the day I gave it to her. She'd unwrapped the box so carefully, like it was a secret. Then she looked up at me, eyes wide, and whispered, "Does this mean you believe in me?" I hadn't understood the question then. I do now. She wore that bracelet every day for almost a year, until the divorce, until the fighting, until the tension in the house filled every corner like smoke you couldn't breathe through. Then one day it vanished. I never asked her why, but maybe I didn't need to. Maybe she had kept it all along, not as a keepsake, but as a relic, a symbol of something beautiful that was too painful to wear anymore. And now, She was returning it. Not to give it back, I don't think, but to say, this still exists. This still mattered. And maybe in her own quiet way, this part of us isn't dead. I wanted to call her, to thank her, to ask what it meant, but I didn't. Instead, I found a small jewelry box I hadn't used in years. I cleaned the bracelet gently, polishing it with a soft cloth until the silver gleamed again. Then I added one new charm, a small olive branch. It was subtle but symbolic. Forgiveness, peace, an offering. And I mailed it back to her. No note. Just the bracelet, with the new charm beside the old ones. Let the silence speak for once, I thought. Let the gesture say what words can't. A few days later, she texted me, "Thank you, that meant a lot." No exclamation point, no emoji. But her message didn't need dressing. It was the most honest thing I'd felt in years, and suddenly, the wedding didn't feel like the ending anymore. It felt like the middle, a painful, imperfect middle, but still part of the same story, and I was still in it. The next time I saw her, it wasn't planned. I was walking out of the grocery store, arms full of paper bags, when I heard someone call my name. Dad. It stopped me cold. I turned, and there she was, Claire. In jeans and a grey hoodie, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, no makeup, just real. She smiled, small but sincere. "Hey." "Hey," I said, the groceries forgotten in my arms. We stood there for a moment, awkward in the way two people are when they're still learning how to be around each other again. "Need help with those?" she asked, nodding toward the bags. "Sure," I said, surprised. We walked to my car side by side. She carried the lighter bag, the one with eggs and bread, and I tried not to make that mean something, though it did. After we loaded up the trunk, she lingered. "How's work?" I asked. "Busy," she said. "We just opened a new outreach center. I'm doing a lot of training and intake." "You always were good at that. Helping people." She shrugged, but I saw the flicker of appreciation in her eyes. There was a pause, then she said, "I read the letter again." My heart skipped. "I didn't want to at first," she added. "I was scared it would just make me angry. But it didn't. Not this time." "I'm glad," I said softly. "It's weird," she continued. "All these years, I thought I didn't want anything from you, that it would hurt too much to expect something and not get it." She looked up at me, her expression raw. "But maybe I just didn't know how to ask." I swallowed hard. "You don't have to ask now, I'm here." She nodded slowly. Then, almost shyly, she said, "You know, there's a park near my apartment. I go there sometimes on Sunday mornings. Just to read. No big deal." I blinked. "Are you inviting me?" She gave a crooked smile. "I'm not inviting you." I laughed, quiet and startled and deeply relieved. "Okay," I said. "I'll bring coffee." "I like oat milk now," she added. "I'll remember that." It was nothing, and it was everything. A casual, tentative, ordinary plan, and somehow it felt more intimate than any apology could have been. Later that evening, I sat in my living room with the charm bracelet on the coffee table, the olive branch catching the light. This was what forgiveness looked like, I thought. Not a grand gesture, not a single conversation, but a series of moments, choices, shared silences, and the simple, sacred act of being allowed back into someone's everyday life. The park was quiet when I arrived, just after 9 a.m., the Colorado sky wide and blue, the benches still wet with dew. I brought 2 coffees, one black, one oat milk, just like she said. She was already there, seated cross-legged on a blanket beneath a tree, a book open in her lap. She looked peaceful, tired maybe, but lighter somehow. I approached slowly, holding out the coffee like an offering. She smiled. "You remembered." I wasn't going to mess that up. We sat without much talking at first. She read. I sipped my coffee. The sounds of birds and distant laughter from a nearby playground filled the silence. It was the most connected I'd felt to her in years. At one point, she set the book down and leaned back on her hands, face tilted toward the sun. "I used to come here with Mom," she said. When I was little, we'd bring old bread for the ducks and sit on the bench near the fountain. I didn't know that, I said. There's a lot you don't know, she replied, but her voice wasn't bitter, just matter of fact. I nodded. That's true. She glanced at me. Do you remember my 8th birthday? I blinked. The Science Museum? She nodded. You took me and Ethan and we got lost in the space exhibit. I thought I'd never find you again. I remember. You cried. I carried you on my shoulders the rest of the day. You bought me a little astronaut keychain at the gift shop. I smiled. I clipped it to your backpack for years. She paused. I kept it. That stopped me. You did? She nodded. It's in a drawer at home. I don't know why. I guess I just couldn't throw it away. Something caught in my throat. You were a good dad, she said, until you weren't. And I've spent a lot of time holding on to that second part. Because it hurt. Because I didn't want to forgive you just because I missed you. I don't expect forgiveness, I said quietly. I know, she replied. But I might give it anyway. Not all at once, just little pieces at a time. We sat there for a long time after that, letting the morning pass slowly around us. Before she left, she stood and looked down at me with a mixture of affection and sadness. I'm not ready to call this healed, she said, but I'm not pretending I don't want you in my life anymore either. That's more than I ever expected. Don't expect, she said, with a gentle smile. Just show up. I watched her walk away, the empty coffee cup swinging in her hand, and for the first time in years I didn't feel like I was grieving her. I felt like I was beginning to know her again. 2 weeks later, she invited me to dinner. Nothing formal, just lasagna at her apartment on a Thursday night. She texted me the address and said, "Don't overthink it, just come hungry." I did. I brought a bottle of wine, though I wasn't sure if she drank anymore. She greeted me at the door with a smile that still felt cautious, but real. Her apartment was small, tidy, full of plants and quiet music. Books stacked on every surface. A life built deliberately. "Smells amazing," I said, stepping inside. "Don't be too impressed," she said. "It's frozen lasagna. I just made it look homemade." I laughed. "You've always been good at presentation." She rolled her eyes. "Old habits." As we sat down at the tiny dining table, I noticed something on the wall. A framed photo, Claire and Ethan at the lake. The same lake from the drawing in the box I'd opened weeks ago. I looked at it too long, I think. "You remember that day?" she asked. "I remember everything about that day," I said. "I remember the pancakes, and the wind on the dock, and how you told me birds know where home is even when we don't." She smiled, and something in her eyes softened. "You used to write things like that in your journals," I added. "I still do," she said. We ate in silence for a few minutes, the kind of silence that used to feel awkward but now just felt peaceful. At one point she said, "I told Ethan I saw you. He was glad. How's he doing?" "Busy, but good. He's always been steadier than me." "I don't know about that. You've always been the brave one." She looked at me for a long moment, then said, "Bravery isn't always loud." We finished dinner. She cleared the plates. I offered to help and she let me, another small permission I didn't take for granted. When I was about to leave, she walked me to the door and reached into a drawer by the keys. She pulled out the charm bracelet. "I don't wear it," she said. "Not yet, but I keep it where I can see it." She handed it to me. "Add one more charm, something honest, something that doesn't pretend we're perfect." I held it like it was glass. "I will," I said. "Take your time," she added. I nodded. "So will you," she smiled. And for the first time, it didn't feel like I was borrowing her love on a trial basis. It felt like I was being invited into something new, not the past, but the future. It took me 2 weeks to choose the last charm. I walked through shops, browsed online, held trinkets in my hand that looked nice but meant nothing. Nothing felt right. Nothing felt honest enough. Until I found it in the least likely place, a tiny shop in Boulder that sold handmade jewelry. It was small, brass, shaped like an open door, Not dramatic, not glittery, just a simple doorframe with no door, wide open. It felt right, because that's what this was now. Not a return to what we once had, not a sudden, sweeping redemption, just a door left open. A space between us that used to be silence now filled with cautious effort, with Sundays at the park, with coffee cups and charm bracelets and conversations that didn't pretend to erase the past. I had the charm added to the bracelet, right beside the olive branch. Then I boxed it up again. Same tissue paper, same careful hands. No note this time. She'd know. A few days later, she sent a photo. The bracelet on her wrist. Nothing else. No text, no commentary. But the image said everything. This is part of me again. And in that moment, something inside me let go. Not of the guilt, not entirely. Not of the years I missed or the birthdays I forgot or the questions I never asked. But of the shame that told me I had no place in her life anymore. I did, not as the father I used to pretend I was, but as the one I had slowly, painfully, honestly become. We didn't talk about the wedding again, not directly, but a few months later, on a rainy afternoon, she called and asked if I'd come over for dinner again. Just me. No holiday. No reason. When I arrived, there was music playing. Lasagna again. Her laugh a little easier now. And then, out of nowhere, she said, "I think I'm ready to ask you something." I turned toward her. She hesitated, then, "Will you come to the non-profit next month? We're honoring family sponsors. I want you there." It wasn't a dance. It wasn't a walk down the aisle. It wasn't public in the way I once dreamed of, but it was something better. It was her invitation, to be seen, to stand beside her, not as the perfect father, but as the one who stayed, who listened, who returned. And that night, as I stood in her kitchen while the rain tapped the windows, I realized something I never expected to feel again. I was forgiven, not in words, not in a grand moment, but in presence, in return, in love, quiet, flawed, and still very much alive. If this story moved something inside you, don't leave in silence. Tell us in the comments, have you ever been left out of a moment you thought you'd be part of? Or maybe have you ever forgiven someone who never said, "I'm sorry"? Your story matters, and someone reading it might need to hear they're not alone. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. It might open a door they thought was closed forever. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real emotional stories like this. And keep watching. Our next video is about to begin, and trust me, you won't want to miss it.